So my name is Manuel Sansilly. I work at Unity Technologies. You probably know what is Unity, right? Who doesn't know what is Unity? All right, good. So that's me. I'm a senior advocate. That means that I get to travel around the world and meet amazing developers and communities and support the learning and trying to bring fresh news to you guys, but also get feedback so that we can do a better job at supporting your work. I'm actually very interested to hear if anyone has been aware of what is Muse, Unity Muse, in the scene. Okay, I see one hand. Perfect. So most of you are not familiar with the tool, right? Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. The goal is to basically present this agenda and spend as least amount of time as possible on slides. I hate presentation where we're just stuck on slides all night. I'm going to actually get into the editor, show you some cool stuff, and also show you stuff that you can do literally tonight when you go back home and install the hub for the first time. Even if you never use Unity, this is totally okay as a presentation for you. But if you're also a veteran, if you've been using Unity for 10 years and you might be like, oh no, that's going to be boring, there is some stuff for you as well. So try to do a good job at talking in the mic while using the mouse at the same time. I'm super tall, so bear with me. But basically, this is what we're going to talk about tonight. Muse, which is our platform of AI tools, which are in the editor integrated on top of it. We're going to have a presentation on chat, sprite, 2D enhancer, and texture. I'm going to explain you a little bit what those terms means. Then I'm going to have a little spiel on what I consider the responsible AI practice at Unity. It's very important to me. I'm an artist. I was traditionally trained. My parents are painters, so going into the digital world was already kind of a stretch from my personal upbringing. And then working at Unity as an advocate, I kind of hold the hat of keeping us honest and responsible in our approach. And that leads to sometimes having to fire people at Unity that just don't follow these things. And we've done that a lot lately. So the practice of ethical AI is a very sensitive term in the industry right now, especially industries related to artists. And I want to basically tell you how is Unity dealing with that? What does that mean for the future of artists? And how we think about AI as a tool to empower us as opposed to replace us. And I think you might be interested with a little bit of that. It's going to be one slide out of the 40 other slides, so don't worry about it. And then at the end, resources. So the way this works is that there will be just one QR code, so you don't have to stress about taking screenshot during the entire presentation. But feel free to do so, and if you want to post stuff on Instagram or LinkedIn, feel free to tag me, Manuel Sansilly, just in case that's how you spell my name. And that one QR code at the end is going to contain all of the links, the resources, the important document you might want to have to test the tools by yourself. So all you got to do is fill a survey that's like 15 seconds long, and it's basically one question. Was it good or bad? And then after you answer it, you get the cool resources. That's it. That's the spiel. Now let's get into the fun part. So what is Muse? Muse is a collection of tools, specifically on the word of AI, artificial intelligence. And it's really trying to think about where in the pipeline does it make the most sense to use AI for creators. And especially for heavy developers, people that are actually quite familiar with the Unity engine, there's a lot of the work that we do that we would like to do less of, and some other stuff where we don't get to spend more time doing. And there's also sometimes a lack of resources. You might be an indie developer that have zero graphical background, or you might be a senior artist that have zero development background. On my side, I'm a designer. I actually specialize in XR, and when I go to work at Unity, and the first time that I joined the company, I was feeling very self-aware that I have zero development background. I was like, I'm never gonna be able to build a game. How do I go about that? Like, I need to learn a whole new program and change the way my brain works. Well, that's not true. There's a bunch of designers and artists that are releasing games, and yes, you have no-code platforms, you have other ways you can collaborate with developers, but I feel like AI can also be used as an assistant to help you prototype and come up with concepts that then you can pitch to teams or collaborators to actually make them interested in your idea so that they can work with you. And if you're working into a studio and you're already working on the games, and you might want to release a DLC or an updated version of your art, and your entire artistic team cannot pour more hours into your game, well, that's another way that you could help train the data that they already produced to create more versions of your assets, or simply to make their life easier. No one wants to spend their entire life browsing through the asset store until they find that one asset that they want to bring into the game, where you could generate it and literally just come up with a prototype and then present it to your team, and then decide if you want to spend time on actually hiring a real artist, because that's what we want to do. So I think that's the goal. Like AI should not be telling you, oh, I had 10 artists and now I can do the work with just one. Let me fire those 9 people and just work with that one artist. No, keep those 10 artists and train them and make them better using AI. So that's kind of the message behind Muse. We really not want to add more crap to the amount of software crap that exists. And we know that we're also not a company that's really focused on trying to beat Midjourney at making a better image model or trying to add one more video model in the market. Like there's many companies that are just focusing on doing that. We're focusing on making multi-platform games, and that's what we do best. So instead, we said, oh, maybe our AI platform could be a welcoming hub for other models to be installed on top, which could allow other companies that are actually already good at doing this to collaborate with Unity. The only caveat, we want them to be ethical in their training data. So there is actually a process where we review how they work, how they've been training their models, and if it's not following the guidelines of how we consider the model to be ethical, we just don't partner with them. So I'll show you exactly some of the companies we work with, why we work with them, and if you might be a company in the audience and you're interested in adding your models to Unity, that's another way that you can think about it. So these are the top core Muse features, I would call. So you have Muse Chat, which is basically your LLM assistant in the Unity editor. And a lot of you might be thinking, oh, another LLM. I already have ChatGPT, Claude, and I'm paying now for DeepSeek. That's way too much. Why would I want one more? Well, the difference is that, first of all, I use all of the above. I also use Unreal Engine. I also use Godot. I love having agnosticity in my software toolbox, and I think it's important for you to all try different tools to understand better what you do at your job. But when it comes to AI, it must be hard to have everything all at once, and it becomes like a subscription problem at some point. You just have too much subscriptions. So the way we thought about it is like, instead of trying to replace ChatGPT or to do just one other LLM, what would be the value of having an AI LLM in a game engine? Well, for Unity, Muse Chat has been trained ethically on Unity proprietary data. That doesn't mean we're trained on GitHub, free public resources that are available online. We're not trained on your code when you make a game on Unity. We're only trained on our data. So what's the data? That's the Learn platform with all of the Unity tutorials that already exist and the courses and so on. That's the entire documentation of the Unity engine from the first lines of codes up to the latest push, and all of the documentation content that exists on our docs page. All of that means that that LLM has core knowledge of what is the editor. So yes, you might be using ChatGPT on the second monitor and ask it to generate some type of code, and it might work, but you still have to copy that code, bring it into the editor, pray that it actually compile, and then if it does, well, that's super cool, and that's your workflow. With Chat in the editor, first of all, you don't need to switch device, which is super cool in terms of workflow. It's like way faster. For those of you that might be XR developer, it's a little bit like trying to develop requests on a MacBook where you have to always push to the device, versus if you're on PC, you just press play and you put a headset on and off and you can prototype faster. And if you're a designer, you know that the speed and the time between an idea and execution and the back and forth define your workflow. So for Muse Chat, it's a little bit of the same. It's in the editor, it's integrated. But on top of that, it knows what is Unity. It knows what adding physics to a game engine means. It means that it knows what is the components. It knows the different assets in the asset stores. It might have more information on a specific rendering pipeline and why you would use it versus another one. And more importantly, and I'll show you that in the editor, you can click on an error code that you have in your console and say, fix it. And it will either fix it, really, or find a way that's maybe less obscure than typing it on Google and trying to find if someone went through the same problem before. And then you have sprite, enhancer, and texture. Those are more on the generative AI side of things. As their name might induce it, it's basically about generating sprites, assets, texture, PBRs, and all of the workflow that you would want to do with editing sprites. And I'll show you why you might be interested into that, even if you don't work on 2D games. Or the opposite, if you're in a 2D game and you're like, oh, I don't need textures, I'll explain why it might be useful. So the rest of that presentation is really just slides. So I'm going to go and just go straight to the end because I want to show you the fun stuff inside directly. So let's keep the slides and let's go in the engine. So first of all, who has tried URP before? Okay. Who has tried the URP sample? You might not know the URP sample. Okay, cool. So in the hub, when you install the hub and you do a new project, on the left side here, you can see, right? Everybody is able to see? Cool. So this is the sample tab. when you start a new project, Unity has a bunch of samples that were made by our custom team in-house. It's like Fortnite for Unreal Engine. Like you can just open it, and there's a bunch of assets that already work, and you can build your game around. Or if you're a beginner, that's a cool way to learn about the engine. Well, in this case, the Universal 3D sample, the first one in that list, you can notice that it has those kind of 4 thumbnails on the description here. That's how you recognize it. You have to just download it, and then you start your project. And then it would look exactly like that. So if you install it tonight, you did nothing else but just install Unity from unity.com and install that sample like I just showed you. You'll get in that same room that I'm in right now, okay? So now I want to show you what's interesting about that particular project. There's 4 scenes inside. This scene is called the terminal. That's kind of like your main hub. That's where you arrive when you install it. And the first time that you do, it might be flickering like that. That's because there's a bunch of shaders that needs to compile. And I wanted to show you the real experience so you're not like, hey, when Manu showed it, it was not flickering. It was lying to us. No. I'm showing you the real experience. And if I click on press play at the top, it basically launches it into a kind of first-person shooter mode where you're looking at your character from an FPS perspective. Give it a couple seconds until it's ready. And then there we go. We're able to move with the mouse, and then WASD, like your favorite shooter, can move around, press shift to run. Up to now, makes sense. Normal video game. But I want to pay attention to this particular place here. There's 3 choices. Either we go right, front, or left. So I'm going to show you in order why we have those different scenes. Each of those rooms are basically a teleporter to another project, okay? And when you leave the room, it stops showing you. Those are actual CRT screen effect made by the VFX team, and it's actually cool. So if I go inside this and I approach the room, you will see there is like literal CRT line on the screen. And that effect is actually pretty cool, but there's nothing behind, like those are just visuals. If you want to actually go into the scene, you just look at this teleporter a little bit longer, and it creates this kind of cool teleporting effect, and then you get into the VR scene. So this scene looks like a very basic game. That's on purpose, because when you're on the VR headset, you have less power, right? Like you need to have less polygons for it to run properly. It's a lower end device. Even though VR is super powerful, the device that holds VR power is a little bit less than a AAA game, right? So we designed this room so that people can have ideas of how to do performance for those assets. It's built in URP, so it's very stable. Oh, by the way, it's always a lie when you see video game scenes. Like there's nothing around, but if you go in, it looks pretty cool. So that scene uses a bunch of cool techniques. One that I want to pay attention and show you, if you activate those gizmos, you see those kind of stamps. Those are called decals. So the value of a decal is that when you select a decal, you have the power to move it around, and it's actually projecting a 2D image on the 3D topology that's beyond. So if I move this decal around, you realize that it's only within the volume of the cube that the pedals are actually positioned on the floor. So that's another use case that you can think of when you're trying to optimize your game for a lower-end device platform like iPhone 8, or if you wanted to play on lower-end devices like PCs that don't have super big graphic cards. Don't try to bring topology and details in 3D for every single object in the room. There's a bunch of other cool stuff in that scene, but we're not going to focus on it today because I want to actually show you the Oasis scene, which I think for this particular software device presentation is the best one. So when we get to the Oasis, again, it's a lie, but when you get closer, it looks cool. So let's talk about AI for a second. So you go on unity.com/Muse, you subscribe to Muse, and you're like, cool, how do I access it now? So once it's installed as a package, it will show up as a menu item on the top of your editor, just right there. You click on Muse, and then you can open the chat. Muse chat will be basically like a pop-up windows that's going to appear, and you have the choice to either keep it floating around like you would do with your ChatGPT or Claude on the side, or you can dock it and really integrate it in the editor. I like to do that because then it's sitting right there for me. I can, go back and forth with the scene. And here's one of the first things that I like to do with an LLM that understands my project. And I'll show you in a second. Let's talk quickly about the interface. So you've used LLM before. Who has used ChatGPT today? Who has used ChatGPT this week? Who has never used ChatGPT? Interesting. Do you have another equivalent of that? You just don't use AI at all. Very interesting. I want to talk to you after. So if you've not used a chat engine before, it basically is just a text prompt, a conversation, and then buttons. So the ones that are important for us tonight to remember are the 3 tabs at the bottom, because Muse Chat has 3 modes: the conversational mode, the run mode, which is a bit kind of agent. So if you heard about AI agents, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the code mode. Code mode is basically like conversation, but instead of having a full conversation and then the code gets in the middle and then you have to select it and paste it, code mode is really meant to help you bring that code as a script in your game. There will be a quick save button. There will be a way to save it as a script directly, but you could very much generate code with the conversational aspect as well. Run is a bit different, so we'll talk about it after. And then you have the history button at the top right. You can see that I've been talking to my friend Muse since January 2024. That's when it was actually created. And then more recently, we have favorites. So the favorites is like starring an item, and it will just put it at the top of the list. That's a way for you to like organize your favorite conversations. But why would you want to favorite a conversation, may you ask? Because it's not like I'm talking to ChatGPT and I need to remember that one thread. Well, in this case, because we can run commands, sometimes you might want to have that command saved as a shortcut. And you'll see why. Because there's a lot of value of having repeatable tasks shortened into a macro, kind of. And for those of you that might have, a macro keyboard dedicated on the side for doing whatsoever, you can understand how that becomes quickly useful. So one of the coolest things, actually, I did this demo yesterday, and one of the conversation that I had was live on stage was to ask, give me a summary of my project, including information about the rendering pipeline, game object, etc. So I'll do a new one just to show you what the interface looks like when you send a question. So you can do, hey, don't need to say hey, but I like to say hey to my AI. Can you give me a summary, full caps lock, that doesn't matter, of my project? And I'm just going to say that and nothing else. When you send the command, you get this kind of loading mode that says musing. Then it's processing the requests. Depending on your Wi-Fi speed, it can go faster or not. And then that's it. It knows stuff like the Unity version that I'm using, so 6.0. It knows that the current active rendering pipeline is URP on PC high. It knows that my target platform is Windows. And it knows that I have an input system and so on. Those information, you might know them already. You created the project, right? But there might be some project information that are just not very much accessible to you from the initial interface. And one of the things that is harder for me to do when I get into a large project like that is to know how many game objects are in the scene. And if you're doing it yourself, like you can count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if there is like hierarchy of projects with a bunch of sub-files, and some of them have sub-elements and so on, we can drill down almost infinitely and never know the full amount of elements. So here's one of the previous conversation I had where I said, how many game objects are in the hierarchy? And what I like is that he didn't give me the answer. He actually lied to me, and I'll show you what he says. He said, well, we have 9, but he was actually categorizing them. So we have Adam, which is true. Adam is the little dude over there. And he recognized that it includes body parts like a pelvis, super cool, and a mesh head. It knows that I have an aquarium, that I have a camera, that I have patrol points, routes, terrain. So he was able to understand and even categorize a different object, but he was giving me a wrong number. So I said, cool, how much in total? And then he said 51. And I was like, I feel like there is at least 51 rocks in this scene. Like, that's not accurate. So then I ask again, because it's iterative, right? We're having a conversation. And I said, can you take into account the children? And I didn't say the children in the hierarchy. I just said children. So maybe it's thinking of my kids. But no, it knew what I meant. And then after doing that, it told me, oh, the right amount, 646. Now that's useful, because if I were to click on every single element in my hierarchy and do that, it would take me all day. And I don't want to be doing that. So thank you, AI. But you're developers, you might have more complex use cases that are not at all relevant to what I just showed you. The reason why I'm showing you that is to give you ideas, so that when you use this type of tools, you might be thinking of a question I don't have in mind as a designer that might be super useful that's currently unknowing through the interface. So just know that Muse Chat is trained on the Unity interface and knows stuff about your project by default. Second thing, we talked about the run and code. So let me show you exactly what that means. One of the coolest things that I like about this project is that the team is made of technical artists, and they actually placed every single one of those elements manually in the water, though. And yes, I could drag and drop the beluga. Yes, that works, but also sometimes it's not animated. I might not know exactly how to work with assets, or I might want to have thousands of belugas, and now if I have to place them manually, that's going to be tough. And then I want those beluga to also move in a way that looks natural and doesn't feel like I just placed them and now they're just like stuck. So I came up again with an idea from Muse to help me solve that problem. I call it the aquarium scatter, as opposed to the scene scatter from the camera. And to do that, we're using a different concept that I want to introduce you to, which is called attachment. You see at the bottom of the screen here, this button, attachment? Well, when you have something selected, you can click on the attach item, and you can attach it as a context to the conversation. But it doesn't just work with prefab from your project, which is the insane part. You can also check objects that are from your scene as opposed to your project. And those two things will be nuanced in the conversation as well. So in this case, remember the aquarium category from the first question? It's because I actually created this empty box. It's just an empty rectangle cube, and I removed the mesh render. The goal was just for me to have a target volume in which I want the fish to be, so the aquarium. It's a tank. And though I select it, I go back to my attach item, and I can also attach the aquarium. Notice that the icon is different because it's just an object in the scene versus an actual prefab in my project. And those two attachments are separated in the context of the conversation. And then I said, scatter this prefab without naming it, without telling it what is the prefab, figure it out, 5 times at random position within the volume of the collider of the aquarium. Figure out what is the aquarium. I told you I attached it. And then rotate each randomly on the y-axis. And then I get this command and I click on run, and it works. That's not that impressive though, because they're still looking like dead fishes. And I want the fish to be moving. That's where code become interesting. On a separate thread, I created the patrol script. And here's the difference with code. Similar to before, I can send a very large prompt to do something, but instead of having at the end a run button as a shortcut, I get a script file, okay? So here I said, write a script that creates a looping animation of the game object, making it patrol between the list of game objects randomly. Each time it will move to a random game object in the list without following the same order every time. Make sure that the Y orientation always follows the direction of the patrol point without any wait time between points, and with the path adapting to the next game object in the list in order to create a curve animation path as opposed to a linear one where the game object absolutely don't need to reach the point before pivoting for the next. Let me control the rotation speed as well from a variable. That sentence is super complex and was hard to come up with, but that's how my brain works. Send that, turned it into code. The first thing it did is verify that the call is compilable. So it will not send your call if it's not compilable. So that's pretty cool to know. You won't have a lot of back and forth. Second, you get a save button, and if you do that, it will pull up, your way to save it into your project, and you'll get that .cs file. Just by default, it will give a name to the thing, so make sure you rename it properly. This one is patrol animation. And let me show you the result. So in the assets here, I do have my Muse chat. One second, where are you? Over there. There we go. And here's the script. It's exactly the same. I'm not lying to you. It's the same that was generated. I then select my belugas, which are right now in the scene. I'm going to lock the viewer here from the inspector, and I'm going to attach this script to the 5 beluga. When I do so, you'll notice that it has an empty list that is waiting to be populated. That's the patrol points. And it has 2 variables we can play with, speed and rotation speed, as mentioned in the script. So I'm going to keep it at 5 just so you see how insane fish look on cocaine. And then we're going to modulate it based on what we want. Also, we need to fill the list. So that list is basically just empty objects, just to show you. That's the only thing I added to the scene before, I promise. It's just those patrol points. I needed them. It's an empty with 5 empty under that are just randomly positioned. So I take that list, put it in the list here, Sorry, I need to actually take the patrol point, not the parent patrol point. There we go, and I'll remove that one. Or we can just add 1/5 one here, it doesn't matter. And now we can press play. Go back to the scene view, and fish on cocaine. Awesome. So the next thing that I want to do is modulate this number through the variable they created for me. So we'll do 1 for the speed and 3 for the rotation point. And just like that, I did not code one line of code, and we have almost believable living fish in my tank. And because all of that is also done through different type of control, I also have the power to change the cube size if I want to. And I can continue to populate in different locations if I want to. So it's just to show you the variation of type of prompts you can use Muse Chat with. We had the conversation, we had the code, and we had the run command. All right? What else can I show you? So part of the presentation was also to talk about generators. So we have, hello Jordan. So we have the Muse Chat, sprites, 2D enhancers, and textures. So in this actual project, there is a bunch of ways we can have fun with that. Once you install Muse, you can install, for example, Muse Sprite. And now, instead of trying to do a model in-house, we decided to make it a platform welcoming other models. So Muse Sprite is now Muse Sprite Partners, which means that a bunch of companies like Scenario or Layer that have made their models ethical and specifically focused on gaming sprites have provided their models. And you can even see which company is which through the thumbnail. And all of these models are specific in a style. So for example, you might be doing a 2D game that's specialized in pixel art and you want 8-bit pixel always. Well, that model is going to be the best one. Or you might be doing a realistic game and you might want to have some assets and visuals for it. Or you're doing an inventory system and you want a bunch of icons that look exactly the same and it's consistent. That's where the models are for. And if you don't know what you're doing, generic style with this weird looking dude. In this case, I'm looking to make a cloud because I wanted to add cloud to my room. So I can say something like a fluffy white cloud. And then when you do that, it will generate the visuals by the amount that you select in the interface. So in this case, it's 2 by default. You can go up to 10. But this is just text to image, right? What if I have a drawing of a cloud and I wanted to make sure that it looks like what I'm doing? So there's a couple different things you can do. You can click on Add to Prompt here, and you'll be able to choose either an image as an input. You can choose a style reference. You can choose a composition. You can choose a pose, you know, from the pose website where you can put like a character looking like exactly what you want. You can do depth reference, line art, which is super useful in our case. And finally, feature reference. This is Hugo from the product team. Say hi to Hugo. He used his face and turned himself into a Pixar character. And there's a couple more options you can play with. In our case, I love those clouds. They look cool, but they won't match the style of my scene because if we look at the scene again, it's pretty much a purple sky and also a very realistic environment. So one thing that I did was, let me close that for a second. I'll show you the result at the bottom. So in Muse Sprite, I took my photo of a cloud that I painted on an iPad, because it's not really the best cloud I could draw, but let's just say that's your skill level. And then I took that as a line art input for generating an image after that, which it did. And that's what I got. And then this cloud was great, but it was also not on the perfect background. And that's why I introduced you to 2D Enhancer. So in Window, 2D Sprite Editor, when you select a sprite, now you have access to Muse within this. And it has a couple different tools you can use. There is the recolor feature, which will change the background to a different color based on a gradient that you add. And that gradient is turned into a palette automatically. So how did I get that palette? I basically took a screenshot of my screen view, turned it into a PNG file, and just drag and dropped it into here, and it created this element. And then you have a remove background button that you can use, as well as an upscale. So I did the 3. I recolored, I removed the background, I upscaled, and at the end, I'm not going to redo it again, I got this super cool empty cloud. And just to show you how 2D object can live in the 3D world, that's the cloud we have over there. So since the beginning, we've been actually lying to ourselves. This is not a 3D cloud. It's just a 2D image in the background. And you could come up with a bunch of other ideas why Sprite would be useful in your 3D world. but I think most likely it's going to be useful for people that are making games in 2D. It's just that I happen to be in the 3D game and I wanted to show you the value. And then the final thing I want to show you is Muse texture. So from the interface, if we click on Muse and then texture, we're going to have a similar interface again. You can type things like gold, the amount of image you want to generate, in this case 4, and we'll get a bunch of images. Once we find the one we like, we can double click on it. We can edit it if we want, using the brush, changing the size of the brush, modifying some objects, and then we can send that again, and it will try to generate more visuals from that original image, following kind of the maps that you had done. So here are the results. If I like this one, then I can right-click and turn it into a PBR material, which means that I'll get the normal maps, I'll get the reflection map, all of the shadows and everything generated in front of us. All of those maps are available, by the way, ambient occlusion and so on. You can look at them, upload them to your preferred image tool for editing, or you can stay here and modify them. But this doesn't look like gold to me, and the reason why is because by default, it doesn't change the value. So I will, for example, in this case, put metallic all the way up, same for the smoothness, and then I will reduce the height so it's a little bit closer to the material. And now it's shining like I like, and I can just save it in my assets, and once it's done, then you have a gold map that you can put wherever you want. So for example, this rock, I want it gold, bam, gold rock. And I've not found something on Google Image, I've generated using Muse texture. And that works for a bunch of different materials. So what I did was removing Adam's face. I actually looked at him and I was like, let me take your face off. Then I copy-pasted the face and I added it in the background over there. There's someone that's yelling in the back and I'm having a hard time focusing, but we're fine. And then I'm clicking here and then I'm drag and dropping the gold on Adam. I made a bunch of other visuals, so let me show you texture here, black rock. I did marble as well, and all of those reflects, the light properly because there's a normal map and so on. It's really PBR materials. I even did a curtain one. I don't think that works well on the mask. I mean, you can think otherwise, but that's actually how we did some of those assets, not initially in the project, right? But just for the sake of the demo, like this golden pillow as well as the carpet in front here. All of that was generated using Muse texture. So that's another one of the tools that I wanted to show you. And finally, let me just go back to the slide quickly. We'll talk quickly about the principle on ethical AI. So like I said, Unity has been working on ethics for a while. Specifically, the principle for ethical AI are around those 3 core values. More creators by design, responsibility by design, and privacy and security by design. And what's important for us is really to make sure that when we do it, we promote inclusion, it's environmentally friendly, and if we work with partners that don't follow these guidelines, we just cut ties. That's as simple as that. But that also means that the community holds us accountable to those values. So if one day Unity does something along those lines of AI that doesn't follow those values, you guys can yell at us on discussions, on Reddit, wherever you want, and we will act on it. It actually happened in the past. A couple months in the project of Sprite Partners, we started working with one of the image generator that were super famous on the market. And then it took us about 24 hours to realize that their model were not ethical, actually, that they kind of lies along the line. Well, 24 hours later, it was out. And that's the value and how we keep them accountable as a community, is to make sure that we respect that. And especially when it comes to AI, there's so many, I would think, predatory way to go about it versus the right way. And no one knows what is the right way, but I think the way that I'm showing these tools tonight can add value to any person workflow, and to use it in a way that empower your team. So like, there's this metaphor that says that it will still take 9 months to make a baby, even if you hire 9 women, you still need 9 months per person. And I think it's the same for art. It takes time. It's not because you have a team of 10 artists that can now spend like more productivity because of AI that you should reduce the size of your team. Don't fire them, augment them. Use AI to make your team better. And that's really how I think the craftsmanship of making a game is a different industry than tech in general. And we need, as artists, to keep companies honest with that. And that's kind of my message. Promise, no more boring message, but that was very important. Before we do the QR code, haha, I lied, but I saw some people ready. I like you. You will be one of the ones that will scan it first. I want to show you one last thing with Muse. So you see these rocks here? It's not for nothing that I put it. So if you click in my history here, I created this gravity drama shortcut. And what it is basically I told it that I want to add gravity to an object. This one of my first pet peeve when I installed the Unity editor the first time. I was like, how do I freaking add gravity to something? Like, I have no idea what it is. Well, now it's as simple as clicking on this and then running the latest version of my command. Boom. What it does, it duplicates this object 50 times in the sky. And then, if you look up, the object's out there. And if I click on them and I deactivate the inspector, you can see that they all have a rigid body, as opposed to this rock over there that doesn't have a rigid body. But how would you know what is a rigid body the first time you install Unity? You wouldn't. You would have to look up online how to add gravity to an object, and that sucks as an experience. So Muse Chat is also trained on natural language for that reason. By me saying just something as add gravity to the object, he understands that what I really want is to add a rigid body to the object and make sure that the collision will happen when it hit the floor. And so now if I press play, we get this dramatic effect and it goes through the floor. And that's exactly what I want you to think about Muse Chat for. It's like it's an addition to your already great skills, but it can help you prototype ideas faster, it can help you come up with concepts, and even the scripting. You could upload your script and ask it to find better way to code or to optimize your coding. And the codes that it generates comes with captions and actual commenting. And for someone like me that was not a developer, I can say that now I'm able to actually learn code by myself and create my own script because I've learned from the comments generated by a lot of the scripts that I've played with. And even though I would never call myself a developer, I feel confident developing because I've been able to be trained using an AI. Things that I've done with a bunch of developers in my career and never learned from them, an AI can do it for me. So that's another use case that I wanted to show you. And I'll leave you with that. And the final QR code, again, all of the links and the important things are right behind this wall. All you have to do is scan it. It will really appreciate for two reasons. One is because, first of all, you get free stuff at the end. That's pretty cool. Second, I get to know if I sucked tonight and if it was not a great presentation to do it better for the next time. And three, we get to do that more often and come back because that's the success metric that we use for my team. So thank you for your attention. Really appreciate it. And I hope that was good.